You know they hurt you. You know this isn't love. You know you deserve better. And yet, something keeps you frozen. Something makes leaving feel impossible, even dangerous. This is trauma bonding, and it's not your fault. You find yourself making excuses that sound hollow even to your own ears. You feel like everyone else can see what you can't see, or worse, that you can see it perfectly clearly, but you're choosing to stay anyway. The most devastating part isn't even the abuse itself. It's the way you've started to question your own sanity. It's the way you've become a stranger to yourself, defending someone who tears you down, craving the approval of someone who withholds their love like a weapon. You've tried to leave. Maybe you've tried multiple times, but something always pulls you back. Something stronger than logic, stronger than self-preservation, stronger than all the well-meaning advice from people who love you. You return, and you hate yourself for it. You wonder what's wrong with you that you can't do what seems so simple to everyone else. Just walk away. But here's what nobody tells you, what nobody understands unless they've lived it. You're not weak. You're not stupid. You're not choosing this consciously. Your mind and body have been hijacked by one of the most powerful psychological phenomena known to human psychology. You're not staying because you're broken. You're staying because your brain has been rewired to believe that your survival depends on this person who hurts you. Today, we're going to explore the invisible chains that keep you bound to someone who destroys your peace. We're going to understand why leaving feels impossible, why your heart races when you think about a life without them, and why every fiber of your being screams that you need them, even when your rational mind knows they're poison. More importantly, we're going to talk about how this bond was forged, how it works in the shadows of your consciousness, and why understanding it is the first step toward breaking free. Because once you see the cage, you can begin to find the key. To understand why you can't leave, we first need to understand what's happening inside your mind and body when trauma bonding takes hold. This isn't about weakness or poor judgment. This is about survival mechanisms that have been twisted into chains. Trauma bonding happens when your nervous system becomes conditioned to associate danger with love, pain with connection, and chaos with home. It's your brain's desperate attempt to make sense of a relationship where the person who hurts you is also the person who comforts you, where the source of your pain is also the source of your relief. Imagine a laboratory experiment where a person is given electric shocks at random intervals, but occasionally the same hand that delivers the shock also offers water when they're thirsty. Over time, that person begins to feel grateful for the water, even though it comes from the same source as their pain. They start to depend on that hand, even crave it, because it's become their only source of relief in an environment of unpredictable suffering. This is your relationship. Your abuser creates the wound and then offers the bandage. They generate the storm and then become your shelter. Your nervous system, in its wisdom, learns to associate them with survival itself. Not because they're good for you, but because they've positioned themselves as your only source of safety in the dangerous world they've created. The cruel genius of trauma bonding is that it doesn't feel like bondage. It feels like love. It feels like destiny. It feels like you've found the one person who truly understands you, who sees your pain, who knows how to touch the deepest parts of your soul. And in a twisted way, this is true. They do know you intimately because they've studied your vulnerabilities, your triggers, your deepest fears and desires. They've learned exactly what buttons to push to keep you off balance and exactly what kindness to offer to bring you back. You're not addicted to the abuse. You're addicted to the relief from the abuse. You're not in love with their cruelty. You're in love with the moments when the cruelty stops. Those brief, shining moments when they're everything you ever wanted them to be, gentle, attentive, loving, remorseful. Those moments feel more real, more precious, more meaningful than anything you've ever experienced. Because in a life that's become defined by emotional starvation, even crumbs feel like a feast. This is why leaving feels impossible. It's not just about walking away from a person, it's about walking away from your primary source of emotional regulation. It's about stepping into a void where you don't know how to feel safe, how to feel loved, how to feel anything at all. Your nervous system has been hijacked into believing that this person, this relationship, this cycle of pain and relief is the only thing standing between you and complete annihilation. But here's what your trauma-bonded brain doesn't understand. You're not leaving love behind. You're leaving a cruel imitation of love. You're not abandoning connection. You're walking away from a connection that was never real, was never safe, was never what your heart was actually seeking. Understanding trauma bonding means understanding the cycle that created it. This isn't a random occurrence. It's a predictable pattern that unfolds in stages, each one designed to pull you deeper into dependency and confusion. The cycle begins with what feels like the most intense love you've ever experienced. In the beginning, they don't just love you, they worship you. They see you in ways no one else ever has. They make you feel special, chosen, understood on a level that feels almost supernatural. This isn't accident. This is calculation. They're studying you, learning your emotional landscape, discovering what you've been hungry for your entire life. Maybe you've always felt invisible, and they make you feel seen. Maybe you've always felt too much, and they celebrate your intensity. Maybe you've always felt broken, and they convince you that your brokenness is what makes you beautiful. They don't just accept your wounds, they seem to cherish them. For the first time in your life, you feel like someone doesn't just tolerate your pain, but actually finds it precious. This phase feels like coming home. It feels like finding your person. It feels like all the suffering in your life was just preparation for this moment, this connection, this love that feels bigger than anything you could have imagined. You think you've won the lottery. You think the universe has finally decided to be kind to you. But then the cracks begin to show. Slowly at first. A comment that stings. A moment of coldness that seems out of character. A flash of anger that feels disproportionate. You brush it off because the love feels so real, so powerful, so transformative. Everyone has bad days, right? Everyone gets stressed, gets triggered, says things they don't mean. You tell yourself that love means accepting someone's flaws, means being patient when they're struggling. As the incidents increase, you find yourself walking on eggshells. You start modifying your behavior, your words, your very presence to avoid triggering their displeasure. You become hypervigilant, constantly scanning their mood, trying to predict and prevent their anger. You lose yourself in the process of trying to keep their love. And then comes the moment that changes everything. The first time they truly hurt you. Not just a cruel word or a cold shoulder, but real damage. Emotional, physical, psychological. The specific form doesn't matter. What matters is that you're now faced with a choice. Accept that the person you love, the person who claimed to love you, is capable of genuine cruelty, or find a way to make it not their fault. Your mind, desperate to preserve the reality you've built, chooses the second option. You make excuses. You blame stress, blame their past, blame yourself. You convince yourself that if you can just love them better, be better, do better, you can bring back the person who made you feel so cherished. You don't realize that person was never real. This is where the trauma bonding crystallizes. Every time they hurt you and then show remorse, every time they create chaos and then offer comfort, Every time they tear you down and then build you back up, your nervous system learns that this person is both your greatest threat and your only salvation. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. The worse they treat you, the more grateful you become for their kindness. The more they withdraw their love, the more desperately you chase it. The more they convince you that you're difficult, oversensitive, or crazy, the more you depend on their version of reality to make sense of your world. You're no longer in a relationship. You're in a carefully constructed psychological prison where your jailer has convinced you that the cell is home, the chains are jewelry, and the key is something you're not worthy of holding. The most confusing aspect of trauma bonding is how your own mind seems to work against you. You know, intellectually, that you're being mistreated. You can see the patterns, you can recognize the manipulation. And yet, despite this knowledge, despite your best intentions, despite the pain, you find yourself drawn back again and again, like a moth to a flame that's slowly burning its wings. This isn't a failure of character. This isn't stupidity or weakness. This is your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do: prioritize survival above all else. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between real danger and perceived danger. It doesn't care about your long-term happiness or your self-respect or your potential. It cares about keeping you alive, and it will sacrifice everything else to achieve that goal. When someone becomes your primary source of both threat and safety, your brain makes a horrifying calculation. Better to stay with the devil you know than risk the unknown. This is why leaving feels like death. To your trauma-bonded nervous system, leaving doesn't feel like escape. It feels like suicide. You're not just walking away from a person. You're walking away from your entire system of emotional regulation, your source of identity, your method of making sense of the world. Your abuser has become your drug, and trauma bonding is your addiction. Just like any addiction, it rewrites your brain's reward system. The unpredictable, intermittent reinforcement, moments of kindness scattered among long periods of coldness or cruelty, creates the strongest psychological dependency known to science. Slot machines work on this same principle. Laboratory rats will press a lever that occasionally delivers food more obsessively than they'll press one that delivers food consistently. Your relationship has become a slot machine. Most of the time, you get nothing. Sometimes you get punished. But occasionally, beautifully, magically, you hit the jackpot. A moment of genuine tenderness, a glimpse of the person you fell in love with, a feeling of being truly seen and valued. These moments don't happen often enough to sustain you, but they happen just enough to keep you playing. Your brain releases powerful chemicals during these jackpot moments: dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins. The same chemicals released during genuine love, during sexual climax, during profound spiritual experiences. But because these moments are rare and unpredictable, your brain craves them with an intensity that feels bigger than love, bigger than desire, bigger than life itself. Between these moments, you experience withdrawal, not metaphorical withdrawal, literal, physical withdrawal. Your body aches for their touch. Your mind obsesses over their words. You feel anxious, depressed, empty, like you're dying from the inside out. And the only thing that relieves this suffering is another hit, another moment of their attention, their approval, their fake love. This is why you stay, not because you like being hurt, but because the relief from being hurt has become the most powerful experience in your life, not because you enjoy the chaos, but because you've become addicted to the moments when the chaos stops. Your brain has been hijacked, your survival instincts have been weaponized against you, and your capacity for love has been turned into chains. Understanding this doesn't make the bonds weaker. but it does help you see them for what they are. Not evidence of your weakness, but proof of your brain's desperate attempt to keep you alive in an impossible situation. While you've been focused on surviving each day, each argument, each cycle of tension and release, trauma bonding has been quietly stealing pieces of your life. The cost isn't just the obvious pain, the tears, the sleepless nights, the walking on eggshells. The real price is more subtle and far more devastating, the gradual erosion of your sense of self. You've lost your ability to trust your own perceptions. They've convinced you that your memories are wrong, your feelings are overreactions, your needs are unreasonable. You second-guess every thought, every emotion, every instinct. You've learned to distrust the very voice that's supposed to guide you through life, your own inner wisdom. You've lost your connection to your own wants and needs. For so long, your energy has been focused on managing their emotions, preventing their anger, earning their approval, that you've forgotten what you actually like, what you actually want, who you actually are beneath all the adaptation and survival. Your relationships with other people have withered. Maybe they drove your friends away with their jealousy and demands for your exclusive attention. Maybe you withdrew from family because it became too exhausting to explain, too painful to pretend everything was fine. Maybe you stopped pursuing interests, hobbies, dreams, because they required time and energy you no longer had. You've become a shadow of yourself, living a half-life in service of someone else's emotional instability. You've confused intensity for intimacy, chaos for passion, control for care. You've forgotten what it feels like to wake up without anxiety, to speak without calculating every word, to exist without constantly monitoring someone else's mood. The most tragic loss is your ability to recognize real love when it appears. Healthy relationships feel boring to you now because they lack the addictive highs and devastating lows you've become accustomed to. Kindness feels suspicious. Consistency feels foreign. Peace feels empty. You've been conditioned to equate love with struggle, and without struggle, you don't know how to feel loved. But perhaps the cruelest theft is what trauma bonding has stolen from your future. Every day you remain trapped is a day you're not building the life you actually want. Every year that passes is a year you could have spent healing, growing, discovering who you are when you're not in survival mode. Every moment you invest in this relationship is a moment taken from your real life, your authentic self, your genuine happiness. You tell yourself you're being loyal, being patient, being loving. But loyalty to someone who destroys you isn't loyalty, it's self-betrayal. Patience with abuse isn't patience, it's self-abandonment. Loving someone at the expense of your own well-being isn't love, it's self-destruction. The clock is ticking on your one life, your one chance to experience what it means to be truly valued, genuinely cherished, authentically loved. With every day you stay, you're choosing their comfort over your freedom, their dysfunction over your peace, their version of love over your chance at the real thing. This isn't about judgment. This isn't about blame. This is about recognition. The price of staying isn't just what you're experiencing now. It's everything you're not experiencing, everything you're not becoming, everyone you're not meeting, every version of yourself that's dying while you try to resurrect someone who was never real. Understanding trauma bonding is the first step toward freedom, but knowledge alone isn't enough. Breaking these bonds requires courage, strategy, and above all, patience with yourself as you rewire a brain that's been programmed to confuse suffering with love. The path to freedom begins with a radical shift in perspective. You must stop trying to save the relationship and start trying to save yourself. This doesn't mean becoming cruel or heartless. It means recognizing that your survival, emotional, psychological, spiritual, depends on your willingness to prioritize your own well-being over their feelings. The first phase of breaking free is what we might call the awakening. This is when you begin to see the relationship clearly, without the filters of hope, fear, or conditioning. You start to recognize the patterns you've been trapped in. You begin to trust your own perceptions again. You allow yourself to feel angry about how you've been treated, instead of immediately explaining it away or taking blame. This phase is often the most dangerous, not just emotionally, but sometimes physically. When you start to change, when you start to pull back, when you start to question the dynamic, your abuser will likely escalate. They'll sense the shift in you and will pull out every weapon in their arsenal to bring you back into line. Love bombing, threats, promises to change, manipulation, guilt, anything to restore the balance of power they've worked so hard to establish. This is where many people break. The escalation feels like proof that leaving would be catastrophic, that staying is the safer option. But this escalation is actually proof that you're on the right path. It's their panic response to losing control. It's evidence that your awakening threatens the very foundation of their power over you. The second phase is building your internal foundation. Before you can leave physically, you must leave emotionally. This means reconnecting with your own thoughts, feelings, and desires. It means remembering who you were before this relationship consumed you. It means imagining who you could become if you were free to grow. This phase requires tremendous gentleness with yourself. You're essentially parenting yourself back to health, the way you would nurture a wounded animal back to strength. You must learn to speak to yourself with kindness, to validate your own experiences, to trust your own judgment again. You might begin by journaling, writing down your experiences without editing or explaining them away. You might reconnect with old friends or make new ones, people who remind you that you're worthy of respect and kindness. You might engage in activities that bring you joy, that help you remember what it feels like to live for yourself rather than in service of someone else's dysfunction. The third phase is practical preparation. Trauma bonding makes leaving feel impossible because you literally cannot imagine life without this person. Your brain has associated them with survival itself. To break free, you must systematically prove to your nervous system that you can not only survive without them, but thrive. This might mean building financial independence, securing your own living situation, creating support networks, developing coping strategies for the emotional withdrawal you'll experience when you cut contact. It means planning for the practical realities of leaving, while also preparing for the psychological war your own mind will wage against your freedom. The final phase is the actual separation, not just physical, but emotional, psychological, spiritual. This is where you must cut the energetic cords that bind you to someone who has become like a parasite on your soul. This phase often requires going completely no contact, because any connection, any text, any email, any mutual friend who shares updates can reactivate the trauma bond and pull you back into the cycle. This phase is often the most painful because you're forced to grieve not just the relationship, but the person you thought they were, the future you thought you were building together, the version of love you thought you'd found. You must mourn the time you lost, the person you became, the dreams you abandoned in service of keeping them happy. But on the other side of this grief lies something you may have forgotten was possible. Peace. Real peace. Not the exhausted silence after a fight, not the tentative calm before the next storm, but actual, genuine peace. The peace that comes from knowing you're safe. The peace that comes from being able to trust your own mind. The peace that comes from remembering that you are worthy of love, that doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself to receive it. What lies beyond trauma bonding is not just the absence of abuse, but the presence of something you may have forgotten was possible: authentic living. When you're no longer pouring all your energy into managing someone else's emotions, avoiding their triggers, and earning their approval, you discover that you have an enormous capacity for joy, creativity, and genuine connection. The first thing you'll notice after breaking free is the silence. Not empty silence, but full silence. The constant noise in your head, the analyzing, the worrying, the walking on eggshells, gradually fades away. You realize how much mental energy you are spending just surviving each day, and suddenly that energy is available for building the life you actually want. You'll begin to remember who you are, the interests you abandoned, the dreams you put on hold, the parts of yourself you learned to hide because they were too much or not what they wanted. These pieces of yourself will slowly emerge from wherever you buried them. It's like meeting yourself for the first time, or perhaps like meeting an old friend you'd lost touch with. Relationships with other people transform dramatically. When you're no longer desperate for approval, when you're no longer willing to sacrifice yourself for acceptance, you naturally attract healthier people into your life. You begin to recognize the difference between people who appreciate your authentic self and people who want to use you for their own needs. You discover what healthy love actually feels like. It's not the addictive high of trauma bonding, but it's something infinitely more precious: consistent kindness, reliable support, genuine care for your well-being. You learn that real love doesn't require you to shrink yourself to receive it. Real love doesn't create chaos and then offer to solve it. Real love doesn't make you feel crazy or question your sanity. Perhaps most importantly, you develop a relationship with yourself that becomes the foundation for every other relationship in your life. You learn to listen to your inner voice, to trust your instincts, to honor your needs without guilt or explanation. You become your own source of validation, your own best friend, your own fierce protector. The scars remain, but they become part of your strength rather than your shame. You understand human nature in ways that others might not. You can spot manipulation from miles away. You have deep compassion for people who are still trapped in cycles you've escaped. Your experience becomes a source of wisdom, not just for yourself, but for others who are still finding their way to freedom. This doesn't mean life becomes perfect. It means life becomes real. You face actual problems rather than manufactured crises. You deal with normal human challenges rather than psychological warfare. You experience the full range of human emotions without someone else controlling the dial. Most importantly, you remember what it feels like to have hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope that someone will change, but genuine hope for your own future. Hope for experiences you haven't had yet, for people you haven't met yet, for versions of yourself you haven't become yet. The person you were in that trauma-bonded relationship was not weak. They were surviving in impossible circumstances with tremendous courage and creativity. But that person was only a small fraction of who you actually are. Breaking free allows you to discover your full self, to live your full life, to love with your full heart, not in service of someone else's dysfunction, but in celebration of your own magnificent complexity. This is what awaits you on the other side of trauma bonding, not just survival, but a life of genuine thriving. Not just the absence of abuse, but the presence of authentic joy. Not just freedom from someone else's control, but freedom to become who you were always meant to be. The path to this freedom begins with a single step: choosing yourself, choosing your peace over their comfort, choosing your truth over their version of reality. choosing your future over their past. The journey is not easy, but it is possible, and you are worth every difficult step it takes to reclaim your life. If you've recognized yourself in these words, if you felt the painful familiarity of trauma bonding in your own life, know this: seeing the cage is the first step toward finding the key. You are not weak for staying. You are not stupid for loving someone who hurts you. You are not broken beyond repair. You are a human being whose magnificent capacity for love was turned against you by someone who never deserved it. Your loyalty, your compassion, your willingness to see the best in people. These are not flaws to be ashamed of. They are beautiful qualities that were exploited by someone who knew how to weaponize your own heart against you. Breaking free from trauma bonding is not just about leaving a relationship. It's about reclaiming your right to live authentically, to love safely, to trust your own mind, and to build a life that honors who you really are. It's about remembering that you deserve love that doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself to receive it. The road ahead may be difficult, but it leads to something precious: your own life, lived on your own terms, free from the prison of someone else's emotional dysfunction. You have survived 100% of your worst days so far. You have the strength to survive this too, and more than survive, to flourish. Take the first step. Trust yourself. Choose yourself. Your future self is waiting for you on the other side of fear, and she is more beautiful, more powerful, and more free than you can imagine. If this video has helped you see your situation more clearly, please share it with someone who might need this message. Together, we can break the silence around trauma bonding and help others find their path to freedom.